Hello everyone, and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Ketubot, pages 25 through 31, Chaf Hey through Lamed Aleph. 25. How de atal kamed Rabbi Ami? A certain person came before Rabbi Ami. Amalei Mechuzakani Bazeshu Kohen, and he says, I know, pretty sure, that so-and-so is a Kohen. Amalei Maraita? So Rabbi Ami said to the fellow, what did you see about this other guy that leads you to believe that he's a Kohen? Amalei Shekar Rishon B'Beis HaKnesses. Well, this guy got the first aliyah in the synagogue. That must mean he's a Kohen. So Rabbi Ami asked, B'chazkas shu Kohen or B'chazkas shu Gadol? Well, wait a second. It's not so clear just because a person receives the first aliyah that they're necessarily a Kohen. It may be that they got the first aliyah because they're a Gadol, because they're a great person, a Torah scholar, something of that sort. So how do we know the guy really was a Kohen? Shekar Levi Acharav, because the second aliyah went to a Levi. And that's proof that it was following the traditional sequence of classes of Jews, Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Rabbi Ami lekon al piv, and on the basis of that story, Rabbi Ami elevated this individual to the status of Kohen. 26. Chavav. Ha'isha shenechbesha bidei oved kochavim. If a woman was taken captive by heathens, adei mamon, for the purpose of extracting a ransom payment, muteret leba'ala, then she's allowed to return to her husband, regardless of whether he's a Kohen or a Yisrael. The assumption is that this woman was not violated because the intention was just to extract financial gain. Then if Fashot, however, if she was being held captive under threat of death, Asur Labala, the assumption is that she was violated at some point and therefore cannot return to her husband. Now, the problem with that explanation is that it's only true if she was the wife of a Kohen. If she was a wife of Yisrael, then if there was non-consensual relations, she should be allowed to return to her husband. So Rashi explains that Asur Labala, the Hoil Venogin by Hefker Choshin Shemit Ratza Echad Mehen. Maybe the woman was a willing participant in one of these encounters with one of her captors, possibly as a means of extracting better treatment while in captivity. Alternatively, the reference is only to a Kohanic wife, and not about willing participation, but where she was violated. Chav Zayin, 27. Shekvashua karkom shel kohanot. If a city was taken captive by a band of heathens, all the Kohanic wives there are assumed to have been violated and therefore cannot return to their husbands. However, if they say we were not violated, and there was even testimony of a shivcha or a nefet of a slave person to that effect that no one had touched them and molested them, then the woman that woman can remain with her husband. However, a person cannot be relied upon to testify about themselves. That if a woman has no outside witnesses to verify her claim, then she is not believed. Chavchet 28. Ve'elu ne'emanim la'id begodlan ma'asheru bekotnan. The following categories of people are reliable to testify in adulthood about that which they saw when they were minors. So years later, they're testifying about what they saw when they were still underage. Zek Sav Yado Shel Abba, this is daddy's handwriting. Zek Sav Yado Shel Rabbi, this is my teacher's handwriting. Zek Sav Yado Shel Achi, this is my brother's handwriting. I remember that such and such a woman was going out with a certain type of veil and with her hair exposed on her wedding night, indicating that she was a virgin bride. And I remember that so-and-so, a kid in my class in yeshiva, would leave to go to the mikveh in order that he should be able to eat truma in the evening in a state of purity. And a person is believed to remember, such and such a place was a beit hapras, where a grave was lost, and where issues of purity have to be followed. And a person is believed to say, in the olden days when I was a kid, we would go to this spot on Shabbos, meaning that was the Techum, that was the Sabbath boundary, that we would go up to this point, we would go no further than that point. 29. Rabbi Yeshivav Amar Bo Netzavach al Akiva ben Yosef Shea Omer Kol She'en Lo Bia B'Yisrael Havlad Mamzer. So Rabbi Yeshivav was one of the 10 martyrs, said we should scream and yell about the viewpoint of Rabbi Akiva, and we don't like his viewpoint. We're complaining about it, that it's overly strict. That Rabbi Akiva declares that a product of any forbidden relation, even a low-level prohibition, will produce a mamzer, whereas in fact the halacha, as we accept it, is that a mamzer is only the product of a union forbidden by karet penalty or capital punishment. But a low-level prohibition will not produce a mamzer. And Rabbi Yeshua said we have to cry foul against the overly strict viewpoint of Rabbi Akiva. Lamed 30. Mishnit chayav skila. What happens if a person was deserving of the death penalty, but the courts are unable to impose it because there are no witnesses, or for whatever reason that justice is not being served in the earthly court? What's going to happen to these people who are deserving of some kind of comeuppance? So the Gemara says they will get that comeuppance in a manner similar to what they should have gotten in the court. How so? If a person was deserving of skila, of stoning, so either he's going to fall off a roof, which was the manner of the execution by stoning, which was the person was pushed off a roof, and then if they didn't die, then rocks were hurled. So either they'll fall off a roof, or will be mauled to death by a wild animal. If a person was deserving of burning, either they'll fall into a fire, or they'll be bitten by a venomous, poisonous snake. If a person is deserving of beheading, either they'll be given over to the government for punishment, and the government beheads people, or listed by law, or bandits will come upon that person and they'll kill him in the same fashion, beheading. If a person is deserving of strangulation, or either they'll drown, or they'll die of some kind of disease which is similar in practical effect to that of chenek. Lamed Aleph 31. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, what happens if it's Shabbos and a person is moving their items from one corner to another of their home? So it's a private domain, Reshut Yachid, and they're moving items from corner A to corner B. But then they change their mind, and they want to take these items out of the domain into the public domain. So, in fact, what's going to happen? The item will have been picked up in the private domain and deposited in the public domain. That would be an akira, a lifting up, and a hanacha, a putting down, which would satisfy the rules of the malacha of hotzah, of taking out, of carrying. Yet, nonetheless, patur, this person is going to be exempt. Why? Because when the item was originally lifted up off the ground, the original akira was not done with the intent that it should cross the threshold from the private area to the public area. So since the akira is deficient in its intent, the malacha will not have fully been done, and thus the person who did the malacha will be a patur, will be exempt. Everyone have a great week.